Hello and welcome to Black Sheep, the motion picture. I'm Jonathan King, the writer and director of the film, and I'm joined today by N.Meister.
Yes, I play Henry in Black Sheep.
And we're here to talk a bit about the experience of making the film and anything else we can think of while we watch it go down. N.Meister.
There's Danielle Mason, my classmate from drama school, so when we were cast next to each other we were quite thrilled. We knew we'd get each other through it, no matter what it was. As
you did, indeed. So this was our biggest ever sheep day, I think, on the film, the most number of sheep ever in one shot.
How many exactly?
I believe exactly 852.
852.
It was going to be 853, but one couldn't make it that day. And this is kind of our flashback, or our early days on the farm when all was good. There's young Henry and young Tucker and the father who dies shortly after this sequence. But yeah, just seeing some good healthy happy farming going down before things go horribly wrong and messed up on the farm.
Henry, Tucker, go get it!
We were all very jealous of the young kids because they got to do 4x4 lessons while the rest of us were shooting. So they'd toddle off to race around the track.
Do the fun farmy stuff while you had to wallow in artificial gore and things like that. That's one of the real dogs from the farm that we shot on at Picareri Farm, just out of Wellington. We were very lucky to have the help of a number of farmers all up that coast, and particularly on our main farm. We couldn't have done it without the help of real farm people and real farm animals, because all of us city film crew people would have been way out of our depth. And these are the titles that were done for us by Teaspoon Films in Wellington, which we're very pleased with, and capture a bit of the chemical, icky, organic feeling of the film and the experiments and things. You'll notice here that this young Angus, played by Eli Kent, has a leg brace on his leg, and sort of like he's born with a gammy leg, and that was something that was kind of a subtle character thing that didn't really pay off in the film, but it actually gave older Angus a lot to kind of explain some of his sort of bitterness and antipathy towards nature, the natural way of doing things, or at least an openness to look at scientific advances which might improve on Mother Nature.
Dudley?
I've never quite figured it out, Jonathan. Who is the black sheep? Is it Angus, or is it Henry?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Well, I think certainly Angus is at the beginning, and it's kind of his actions which drive how everything goes horribly wrong on the farm. But by the time Henry comes back to the farm, he's kind of the black sheep.
I'd have to agree.
Good, yes. There are no actual black sheep in the film.
This was a fantastic scene. I was actually back at the unit base while they were shooting this, and I could hear the screams from there as Eli was running around with the sheep head on his own head,
which we're about to see. A most excellent, horrible sheep carcass. Yeah, and Eli did an incredible job of this, as did Nick Fenton as young Henry in reacting to all of this. But here we see the seeds of all of Henry's horror at the sheep.
Henry. Boys.
And our first look at Glenys Leviston, who we'll talk about later on, who was amazing as Mrs. Mac. And now suddenly we flash forward 15 years. He's all grown up,
but still struggling with everything,
especially the sheep. And of course, as you can see, another one of our big sheep days where we actually blocked the road. This was a public road where and it was quite early in the morning. People were trying to get to work, and we closed the road and filled it with sheep for our movie. So as you can see, this is a taxi, and Henry is coming back to the farm at last after some time. And I had this idea that he was now such a wuss that he couldn't even drive his own car. He had to come by taxi.
Oh, so that's the reason for the taxi, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we look very much at the fact that such a traumatic incident, and then the connection with the sheep, his pet sheep, has sent him over the edge, and so for the last 15 years he hasn't been able to face anything of the farming upbringing that he's had.
Exactly, yeah, and in constant communication with his therapist, and yeah, just completely terrified of even the sight of sheep out the window. But heading back into the farmland where the story's all going to take place, and this was actually not far out of Wellington, as were all of our locations. But it was amazing. So each day we'd drive out to set, and it only take, at the most sort of 30 minutes to get out there, and suddenly you're in amazing countryside, miles from anywhere.
It highlighted for me how absolutely devastating it would be to be scared of sheep in New Zealand, because really 15 minutes out of the capital city and you're in sheep country already.
Exactly. And our first sight of Experience and Grant. Hey, close fish side free. Great gag, that one.
Come on, Possum.
What's that?
And first sign of Angus's aeroplane, which was flown in specially to that location, in fact, for the film from the Wairarapa, a couple of hours, or an hour or so north by car of the city. And they could only get the plane there if it was going to be good enough weather to, and get it out again if it was good enough weather. But luckily we did have good enough weather for it. So all our plane stuff was filmed at that location there. And now we see grown up Angus, played by Peter Feeney. And just in that spot there is a number of deleted scenes, which you can also see on the DVD, which had a lot of other stuff as Henry was getting to the farm and introducing Tucker, the farmhand, and some more of Angus. But it really slowed down him getting to the farm, so we wanted to, back to the house at least, we wanted to speed that up as much as we could. And there's our amazing homestead too, which was also in the Wairarapa, which is north of Wellington. And other than the farm homestead and the barn, which we saw before, everything was pretty much in the same coast, just out of town. And those were a couple of other things that we couldn't find as close to town as we wanted to, so we had to go further afield for that.
Yeah, this was our only sort of overnight stay outside of Wellington Central.
Mm.
It was a fantastic place, owned by a family who came out there mostly on the weekends.
Yeah.
Filled with memorabilia.
Although that's some of our own memorabilia.
In Stone Street Studios.
Shh. Don't spoil the magic of cinema illusion. No, indeed, that was one of our fantastic sets designed by Kim Sinclair, which linked really well with the house that we had for the exteriors, and even, of course, the geography of the building and stuff.
It was really fun being able to see what had changed. It's this whole mismatch of technology versus the old stuff of the homestead and the farm.
Right, indeed, yeah.
Very much Angus trying to put his mark as a modern farmer, but all the years that have built up the farm still evident in the pictures and also the house itself.
Unless you fancy nostrils in the back of your head, I'd not be moving if I...
This was the first time I've had a shotgun at the back of my head, and I doubt whether I'd smile again if that was the case. She may look nice, but she's chilling, I'm telling you.
And that was Glenys Leveson, of course, who is really terrific as Mrs. Mac. And I saw a huge number of older actresses for the part, and just didn't feel like I seen anyone who had what the part needed. And she pretty much retired, and Liz Mullane, our casting director, said, "Oh, there's just one more person we could try." And she came down. As soon as she came into the room, she was amazing, and so I was thrilled to get her. And then I discovered afterwards that she was in Brain Dead, Peter Jackson's film.
Oh, fantastic.
A sort of connection to the genre, but no, she totally made this part her own. And these guys were great. Louis Sutherland and Richard Chapman as
The old field.
the uncomfortable farmhands.
Now you take it.
Looking very ungainly in their short sleeves and ties.
With singlets underneath the shirt.
It's not the farmer's uniform by any stretch of the imagination.
I'll take the other microphone. Give it to anyone else who.
And the big first meeting between myself and my brother, 15 years on.
Yeah, and this is where we first really see Peter Feeney as Angus,
Always have some control, don't they?
who I think is so great here. He's so clean cut and kind of buttoned up in his tweed coat as well, which is one of the bits I love. And if you've seen the film already, you'll know he ends up without pants and in a terrible state by the end of it. But you've got no clue here, which is what I really love about his performance. It goes really nicely through the whole film.
A lot of action takes place on the Picariri lawn there, from the massacre coming up in the film, and also the rather ungainly moment with a sheep on my back.
Indeed, but we mustn't spoil too much of what's coming ahead
Side. I'll cut you a cheek.
for the people who are watching the commentary before they watch the film. And now we get to the lab where all the nefarious goings-on are happening in the farm. And this is an amazing building, which again is just slightly further down the same coast out of Wellington. And it's actually the building where all the radio transmissions coming into New Zealand came there first and then were distributed around the country. And it wasn't really what I had in mind for the lab when I wrote the script, but it was such an incredible building that as soon as I saw it in the location, you know, in the setting for the film, I knew we had to use it in the film.
A lot of the set dressing was just incredible, and on the locations, arriving there and seeing what was actually inside the building and what they had done outside was incredible.
Exactly, and great. Yeah, though, obviously we brought all that stuff, but just kind of makes it into that farmy industry thing. And these guys were really terrific as our kind of lab henchmen as well. Ian Harcourt and James Ashcroft, of course, who's fantastic.
Now their names, of course, have some significance that doesn't really come across so much in the film as it does on paper, I think.
Exactly. Well, they're called. I had to think of names for them. So if you look at the credits, you can see what their names are, which will have significance for New Zealanders, and absolutely none for the rest of the world.
Right. And what was Toad?
So Oliver was somebody who, you know, he's a reasonably well-known actor in New Zealand, but so terrific and so funny, and we actually. He first auditioned for Angus, and he was so great in that audition, but just not quite right for Angus that we said, oh, we've got to get him in there somewhere. And Grant was sort of a sideways shift of thinking, but he had such fun with it and did really well with it. Just brought a lot of kind of gangly humour to it, which is, you know, Grant's sort of character is so much kind of leaping in without thinking, and his whole physicality just helps that as well.
Isn't kind of good.
Is there any somewhere?
Go!
This action sequence always gets me. I loved seeing parts of the film that I had no idea were there because I hadn't been part of them myself. And seeing this, and especially on some of the pre-publicity, just made me crack up, and I thought, so this is the film that I'm part of.
Yeah. This sequence, which we're about to see now, is one particular bit that turned out almost exactly like I had it in my head. And other parts of the film, you know, you have a version in your head, and then as you shoot it, that evolves, and then as I saw the editor had first done, that evolves, and then as I worked with the editor, that would evolve. But this was one sequence. As soon as I saw it, I was like, yep, that's exactly what I hoped it was going to be like.
And I think that's what everyone who sees the film, they go, yep, this is exactly what I hoped it would be like.
Yeah.
Little mutant sheep hanging off other people.
I mean, when you see this bit, this is however far this is into the film, and certainly all the sort of film festival screenings I saw it with, this is the bit where everyone kind of really gets on board and they know the kind of film they're in for, and if you enjoy this, you'll enjoy the rest of the movie, I think.
Fantastic special effects makeup. Several hours in a chair, but always worth it.
Yeah.
For me.
So here I signed my right to the farm away for a paltry $2 million.
I had to think of a sum of money that was plausible enough that part of a farm could be worth it, but
It's barely a townhouse in Auckland these days.
Exactly.
What was I thinking? And Angus, of course, wants to see the back of me as quickly as possible. He's a bit concerned about my cold feet at the deal.
exactly. And the closer you get to his filing cabinet's full of secrets, the more kind of anxious he gets.
Now, on the day you were quite keen on getting this in one shot initially.
And that's why there were 17 takes of it, but not because of your fault, but because of all the issues that go into making things work. Yeah, I can't remember why I was so adamant about that. It just seemed like trying to cut down on how many setups I did, but then of course you take so long having to get it right that sometimes it's better to do a number of setups.
We really look forward to this as actors, to be able to put this large stretch of dialogue between us down, because it really sets up the relationship as it builds throughout.
Well, you guys were great in all of that stuff, and that was stuff we'd rehearsed too. Those things with the kind of relationship stuff with the brothers. So I think by rehearsing some of those key scenes, when we came to shoot them, they had kind of dimension to them, and it helped flesh out all the rest of the film. Particularly slushy, glucky, voluminous rabbit there.
Who would have thought so much could come out of such a small little mammal?
I know.
The golden shears.
Stuff of legend.
The real golden shears, in fact, probably look nothing like that. But I was very pleased with those, and they should come back later in the film.
I never got to hold them for any length of time before Sarah, head of props, would whip them out of my hand for fear of my fingers getting cut. I had a terrible penchant for finding sharp things on sets.
I think she was more worried about the prop than you actually was.
No, say it isn't so, Jonathan.
Oh, here he is.
And here's our first look at Tucker, played by Tammy Davis.
Tammy did probably the most preparation out of any of us for the film. He stayed on the farm for a length of time working with the farmer, and I think he had a job offer at the end of it.
I know he was fantastic. It was very dedicated, and he slipped right in there and got to work, and yeah, totally bonded with the farm guys. And there's our hideous little lamb creature.
And one of the star sheep, it might be Margot or one of the other.
It quite possibly is actually.
Other named ones.
This was one sequence that took about 3 goes to get the puppet and the trained sheep to do all the same things at the same time.
We struck some ferociously cold weather at the very beginning of the shoot, and everyone thought it's only going to get colder from now. Danielle was very happy to have polyprop thermal tops as part of her costume.
I think that was her coldest day actually. That was when we were so busy setting up the crane for the shot, and we kind of looked over and Danielle's going a bit blue actually. We better keep a closer eye on her.
Streets, bro. So you're a model now or something?
I'm doing IT.
And this was in fact the first day of the shoot, wasn't it?
It was one of the first shots. I was handed the clapperboard and said, "You know what to do with this, don't you?" And I nodded blindly and then proceeded to get it completely wrong.
And was an amazing day. In fact, we were very lucky. We had such incredible weather for the first day. We thought, it'll be fine. And some very foul days rolled in over those hills, which are currently on the left.
We had fair warning of it though, because we could see all the way out to sea.
You could see it, and 15 minutes later it would be on top of you. Now this was a scene that Tammy did in his audition, and he was so terrific. He was probably the only cast member I saw his very first casting tape, which I wasn't even there, and I said, that's the guy for this part.
Give us a hand, bro.
Yours was very good too.
But, cheers. Thank you, Jonathan. I like the fact that Tammy, in this situation, you really see the care that Tucker has for the animals, rather than just, get out of the way, you stupid animal. It's like, what's wrong with you? Come on.
Exactly. And that's what Tammy brought so effortlessly in that first casting. And
out of the 3 of us, Tammy has had the most screen experience, and it was great to have his relaxed, sort of experienced hand on board.
Yeah, well, he was so relaxed in front of the camera and so relaxed with the crew and things that he just kind of eased into it every time. It made everybody's job a real pleasure and made everybody kind of relax. And he'd arrive in the mornings and do the 5-minute quiz.
That's
out
right,
of the
5-minute quiz. I always thought he must have looked at the answers first, because he seemed very, very astute. When my father saw this film, this was one of the parts that he commented on. I asked him, "What do you think of it, Dad?" And he went, "It's quite gory when he eats the rabbit."
Now this is a great scene that which turned out really, really well. I think another one that we rehearsed, and I think we had a lot of fun rehearsing with you guys, but it really kind of comes to life in the film, I think. And by the time we know what we know about experience, and we know about Tammy Tucker, and I think we really enjoy seeing those two different things coming together in this scene.
No, you have a very self-assured...
Oh, it's got a lovely punchline for a scene, and all three of us, this is our first time. We shot this reasonably well into the shoot, didn't we?
I think so, yeah. I only remember the film now. I don't really remember what order we shot stuff in. So Danielle, as experience, who we haven't really talked about, was someone else who I thought was pretty clever for the part from pretty early on too. And we tested out a few different combinations of people in auditions, but she brought a really lovely thing to the character, in that experience could be really quite annoying, but I think you end up liking her as well. And even between Danielle and myself, trying to work out how we were going to convey that and how to sort of find the tone of the character. But so I guess even in rehearsals and perhaps early in the film, we weren't entirely sure of it, but I think once we locked into it, it was really easy. And Danielle was so terrific at conveying the fun of that without it being painful.
Interesting book that he's reading there.
Yes, that's a book written by my late father, which I was very pleased to get in there as a small nod.
His mum and them were there, and they were like looking around at us.
Tammy ad-libbing nonsense.
Yeah.
Which then we had to try and ADR over the scene because of wind later on, and we're like, what is he saying? He had to come back in and make it all up again.
What about me?
Can we give you a ride somewhere?
Maybe to the car, so I can,
I always enjoy Tucker's response to everything.
Yeah.
the ground.
Are you nuts, man? Don't bring her along. Chicks will only ruin it.
Experience.
Someone asked me at a film festival in New York, actually, if there was something going on between Tucker and Henry that the girl had come along and ruined. And
No way.
I don't know. I think you might have been reading it just a little bit more into it than.
Wow, if they're reading that into it, what do they think when the sheep start getting in on the air?
Exactly.
Tammy displaying some of his stunt driving skills,
Yep.
which later come to the fore, but I won't spoil it. You coming?
And again, this was another terrific location, just in the same region out of Wellington. Cut to the studio, in fact.
Continuity with blood is one of those difficult things to maintain, isn't it? Footsteps going through.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of those times where I got in there with the squirter and just had to add a little bit more until it was exactly right.
Oh my god.
Now this is a gag that either you...
The feng shui in this room is terrible.
You either love or you hate. I think it's quite funny. And it's had a good laugh many a time.
Very
but,
typical experience, though.
Exactly.
Anyone there?
What?
Henry's still a terrible wuss.
The shot coming up here with the sheep in the corridor was one that just seemed identical to the graphic art that had been produced for the film.
Indeed, by Weta Workshop, who did some amazing concept art, and there was one particular drawing that Greg Broadmoor had done, which we kind of almost went to echo that when we were shooting it, because it really summed up an image of how we saw the film, and sheep in incongruous places, like in a corridor, was definitely a kind of a visual for the film, I think.
Just completely confounded and irrational fear that one day this is going
And our shining moment coming up as well.
Yeah.
Well, this happens when you run the most...
We actually did some rehearsals on the set, because at that stage this was already up, and it was quite fun bouncing around between the walls and getting a real idea of where it would be shot.
And it was such a great set too. I mean, it felt just like a real sort of cottage, didn't it, when we were in there?
Like every school camp you've ever been on.
On then mutton chops! Bugging me.
And this is a great moment too. I enjoy looking at people in the room when that happens and see how many people jump, which a lot of people do, which is great.
And that's my favourite line. Shoot it again.
Give you something to talk to your therapist about.
That's what I like too, actually. So yeah, all Henry's worst nightmares are now coming to pass.
The whole idea that all the things he thought were only in his imagination are now out in the fields.
And this moment, certainly in the script, started life as something of a homage to The Birds, the Hitchcock film, though it evolved a little bit by the time we got to shoot it. Now there's a great line that Tucker says here,
Rattle your dags, Henry!
which is very funny. When I saw the film in France, it was "Rattle your dags" was translated as "Courage, Henry," which I thought was an interesting piece of international translation.
They're fine.
You get Henry, I'll start the car.
All three of them trying to deal with it in different ways. Tucker sort of going, I'm in control, they're just sheep.
Yeah.
Old greenie experience, feeling that nature couldn't do anything to us as long as we're nice to it. And then Henry just going, this is just too much.
And experience now using her grounding techniques.
Come on.
Has someone done this to you before, Jonathan? Where'd this all come from, this part of the script?
I have. I've heard of these things. I haven't really experienced particularly myself, but I've heard of and read about and talked with people about psychological techniques to ground yourself and cope with stressful situations.
Really?
Yeah. Like film sets.
No, real life's much worse than a film set. But I love how this is now something is finally starting to work for Henry after all his serious psychotherapy, actually being in amongst it and just sticking with it, and with experience's help, he's actually has a hope of surviving. So
And this is the first time where Henry they form a bond now. They're not just the two that have the least experience on the farm, but there's something for each other. You know, she's there to help him, and he's got someone to turn to.
Exactly, and he gets to give that back to her later on in the film too.
Some excellent puppeteering here.
Yeah. And a great little improvisation by you two, which
I felt the need, just made the offer, and it just seemed right.
And I remember we were shooting. I said, "Are you grabbing her breast then in here?"
And I said, "Yeah, is any problem with that?" And he goes, "No, that's fine. I just would have never asked you to."
But I really love this sequence here. Is when we really encounter the kind of threat head on, and we had an amazing. This is where these puppet sheep and the animatronic sheep really came into their own, and you really believe that this is a dangerous animal that he's stuck in the Land Rover.
We'd be on the low rider and hear Jonathan calling out, "More drool! More drool!" And it wasn't from us, thankfully, it was from the sheep. That's Tammy driving, and I feared for my life bouncing in the back of that thing.
And that was an addition of Tim Preble, the sound designer. When he bangs the sheep against the steering wheel, the horn sounds, which is the moment I love. And this whole sequence took days to shoot, actually, with different combinations of the Land Rover on a kind of low, or the Land Rover being towed, I think, weren't we, in bits kind of outside with the camera pointing in, and then real Land Rover stuff, and in all sorts of parts of the farm. That's a terrific moment that gets a laugh all around the world.
This was great for us to do, because we could do a whole sequence of it. Nothing was carved up, it was really chasing the action.
And actually jumping off the moving Land Rover. I was very impressed that you were game for that. And
well, after being on it for 2 days, we'd do anything to get off it.
And then this stunt we only had one go at, because we only had one Land Rover, but we were running 2 cameras on it. So we'd actually hoped that the Land Rover was going to flip and roll, but And I was a bit disappointed initially that it didn't, but in retrospect it was quite neat that it kind of folded up and it did something that you don't normally see instead of the most typical kind of end over end thing.
Then a big emotional moment, bringing cleverly back to Henry's fears of this being the place where his father fell to his death.
Long way down.
But already we're seeing that you're a bit kind of untucked and a little bit bolshy even, and
Sorry.
it's great. We're starting to see the makings of perhaps the hero of the film, even though he still proves feeble when called upon to rise to the occasion. We're starting to see the signs of someone who's maybe game to give it a go anyway.
And that was the fun thing. That's what really attracted me to the role, was the idea of a low, slow build to being the hero of the film, but lots of pitfalls on the way.
Yeah, and I was so pleased with what a great job you did of it too, because you make a film out of sequence for the most part, but when you watch the film, there is that slow build just kind of works constantly, and you don't sort of see the shifts happening. So I think you did a terrific job. You can't put where those changes happen, but bit by bit, you become the hero of the film, which was great.
With about 50,000 sheep in between.
Then what?
Then I get as far away from here as I can.
Which disappoints Tucker, of course, who thinks everything's going to return to normal. Get rid of Angus and have a farm that doesn't seem to be in disarray.
Exactly, and when called upon, you
Then Angus is going to have
still
some
reject the opportunity. Now those were very crappy little sheep souvenirs. We decided, okay, we're going to see some little sheep souvenirs, and it was incredibly hard to get some that we actually liked and that we could afford actually.
There's a market for us to get into, Jonathan.
And this is back at our homestead location with amazing gardens and in a beautiful old building.
And one of my favourite gags, a taxi clicking over to $1,000.
And that's Nick Blake, who quietly sleeping, but a lot of people have asked me, what happened to the taxi driver, and who we do see in fact meet his end later in the film, but he was someone that lots of people remembered vividly.
You cannot make a cup of...
And that's Tandy Wright, who we haven't talked about, who is our Dr. Rush, our mad scientist, who again I thought was really terrific at bringing that quite kind of buttoned up, put together, uptight kind of sciencey thing.
James here sets up the offal pit just beautifully with how distasteful it is, and this sequence makes just perfect sense to bringing in these killer sheep with Laurel and Hardy there.
Bloody animal.
Never insult a sheep. They'll get you in the end.
And then a great gag here, greatly enhanced by the sound design as well. That kind of whomp noise when it hits really brings that to life.
Do you use any animal sounds slowed down like they did in Star Wars with the fighters or anything like that?
Later on, when the one of the sheep gets burnt, is real animal sounds kind of cut together and twisted and stuff, and we actually set fire to a goat. No, we didn't set fire to it. We just recorded it, I think. And I love what Oliver's doing here, vaguely sheepy thing, standing in the middle of the road, which again is something that you'll find sheep doing in New Zealand.
And reacting in a very sheep-like fashion.
But then snaps back to his annoying, bolshy activist kind of persona. And I love he's got little bits of wool starting to tuft in his hair there as well.
Angus Oldfield.
Dave Elsey did a fantastic job of the prosthetics on this.
He sure did. So this was a great makeup
I know all about your Frank
of him starting to turn sheepy.
Mother Nature spent millions of years making sheep. She doesn't need
Dave Elsey here wasn't actually. This must have been, I think, the second day of shooting, and Dave wasn't here this day because he was at the Academy Awards, in fact, where he'd been nominated for an Oscar for Revenge of the Sith. So somebody else had to apply the makeup on this day, but he was back after the second day, I think. So I was prepared to let him go to the Oscars.
Yeah, just this once.
As did our art director Simon Bright, who was nominated for art direction for King Kong. So we had a very high-powered crew, in fact, on our silly sheep movie. And this was another vista on the road out to the farm.
I'm the third hobbit from the left.
And it was a landscape that I definitely wanted to get in the film somewhere as soon as I saw it from when I first started kind of looking for locations. And I knew that it was a moment that we had to get. And so we actually biked you guys up there at the end of one day.
Yeah,
didn't we?
and you were on a hugely long lens, weren't you?
Yeah. And we had a certain amount of time before the sun went down, but we got the shot, obviously.
Grant's part of our collective. We're a non-profit cooperative that shares information and
This
resources.
is where
about our
experience really shows her mettle.
Cowboy lab.
She's almost quite pleased with the situation now. She's got the upper hand. She can tell people what's happening, and she's probably the one most likely to come up with a solution at this
I
stage.
would have thought
Well, the moral high ground. But yeah, well, she probably hasn't got a solution though. She's just got. She can lecture everyone about what they're doing wrong. But
All in one breath,
I love the breath at the end.
and not once did she get that wrong. I think some like 7 takes and not one stumble.
Really fantastic.
occupying a poultry farm. Anyway, that's none of your business.
Are you okay?
And here's our first clue of worse to come.
This is a good gag
Rescue remedy?
that only New Zealanders get to, I think. Which Rescue Remedy is this sort of vaguely all-purpose hippie product that
Suit yourself.
well-meaning people give you when you
Stick together.
cut a
At a
limb
shop.
off or something.
Taco, I'm sorry, it's my fault. You got better. Don't worry.
And another great prosthetic designed especially for Tammy's foot, actually, I think.
I'll get a tip in the shop when we get back. Clear it right up. The sheep did that. Then I'll get the vet to have a look at it. It'll be fine.
And now we see some of our sheep in actual flocks now. So often we'd have you'd have 1 or 2 trained sheep who were coming when they were called, and they would lead the other sheep over the hill, which is certainly what's happening here.
So the sheep really do just follow.
They do. Well, they'll follow one sheep that knows where he's going. Probably that front one there is being called, and the rest are just following it.
Hey, there looks like a good place to go and hide.
Or is it?
Surrounded by sheep.
From everywhere.
I'm quite short-sighted, so Jonathan would say, all right, look over there, there's 100 sheep coming from there, there's 100 sheep coming from there, and I'd just say, there may as well be.
Go on, get good.
And excellent dog acting here too.
By Dice.
Dice, who was very good at anything he was asked to do. And this is our lab interior, which was built as a set in some of our studio space. Actually, in fact, in the bones of a real building, but quite significantly dressed.
Some lines that really get laughs. Tucker's got some brilliant lines. What's this one? I just thought they were playing around with sperm or something.
It didn't get as big a laugh as it was meant to, actually, but
Made me laugh.
good, made me laugh too.
This day probably was very entertaining for me because it was almost a full complement of actors as well.
Yeah, well, I loved it actually. Yeah, it was really enjoyable because you had what at least 5, if not 6 actors in the
6
scene,
actors.
all kind of playing this big scene, and it felt like a real day of filmmaking actually, just doing a big long scene. And
And we got through it really quickly because I remember it was scheduled to take longer, but maybe it was because there was a lot to get through that everyone was working really hard.
yeah, I mean, you can run a whole scene as kind of continuous action and following different parts of it. Everyone kind of gets up to speed, and it was a real pleasure actually.
It was my first time acting with Tandy Wright, who is quite a veteran of New Zealand screen now.
She is, and had a lot of fun. Again, someone who really kind of got the character and brought a good cold evilness to it.
It's a fantastic environment for what goes on in there, isn't it?
Well, lots of great props and stuff in the corners, which do absolutely nothing but look like kind of plausible medical equipment.
Chasing a wool-blind you.
Angus, there's something wrong with the sheep. They attacked.
Come on, brother. Believe me.
That's clearly one of these lunatic greenies.
Tucker, show them your foot.
Foot.
Henry, I simply won't allow you to disrupt things today.
What are you going to do about it, eh?
I love that visor was something that somebody just found, and we put it on Tandy. It was so stupid, and it makes this great noise when it goes up and down. It's so balmy that we decided to put it on her.
What? Move your ass!
Henry, come on!
The whole film seems to really ramp up from here. This is one of the first times that there's a standoff between Angus and I. We didn't really do a lot of scenes together in the film. It was such a film based on our relationship, but we'd only meet at these really crucial times. Him in the rehearsal, him, standing up and going, the farm is more important than my brother. And then the scene coming up by the offal pit.
Exactly, yeah. It's interesting that, you sort of meet at the beginning, the middle, and at the end of the film, and you've kind of changed at each of those points, and this is the point where for the first time you're kind of called upon to do something, and you're not sure what to do, but at least you don't just completely wuss out and run away. Look over there. Oh!
The remains of Preble?
Preble is name was in the film, yeah. And as soon as I heard what an offal pit was, I knew I needed one in the film. And
as soon as I read this part of the script, I knew I had to be in the film. I thought, when will be the next time I'll be able to do this?
And this was a scene, in fact, we shot over a couple of days, and partly for weather issues, and I think it was sort of weather, but we actually kind of simplified the action a bit when we kind of came back to it, and I painted myself into a little bit of a corner of in the scene, the sheep are all kind of going crazy at the wire, but how do we actually film the sheep going crazy? So Chris Plummer, who was the editor of the film, was a big help in sort of recutting it in a way that, or showing me a way it could be recut to make it kind of more simplified.
Because initially that was quite a different stunt where we were really avoiding the sheep by going around the hole, because sheep got into the offal pit, into that caged area, and the stunt was jumping and slipping on the edge and landing.
But we still had the jump, didn't we? But
sort of slipped in from the side now. A little less heroic, I thought.
So the hero now drags the girlfriend or the girl into the pile of bloody offal. Scum.
Thank you, Jonathan King.
This was a lot of fun to make, and a lot of fun for me to watch you guys.
It was even fun to ADR when encouraged to just, can you make some sounds like you're gagging or about to vomit? And just looking at the screen, which we hadn't really seen, made it quite easy to gag.
And one of the great things about the offal pit was that because we're shooting the film out of sequence, before the beginning of the film we had to establish how kind of bloody your clothes were going to be. So
the last day of pre-production gave us a good indication of what was going to happen.
Yes, we got to drop you into the bloody scum. It was great fun.
The offal pit in the cave was also our first wet weather cover day, which meant on the call sheet the next day would show the day we're expecting to have wet weather cover, and every time it said offal pit, offal pit. So day by day Danielle and I went, it could be tomorrow. We could be knee deep in filth tomorrow.
And it was terrific when we were making the offal pit. I remember the technicians from Weta Workshop turning up with 2 huge plastic buckets.
That's right, one with blood and the other with scum.
Slime, I think it's.
Oh yeah. And he said, this is what I came to New Zealand for. And I went, thank you.
That was Bill Hunt, who took to it with great enthusiasm. So this is our first glimpse of the uber sheep, the perfect sheep which science has created.
All we had to do was leave.
But in fact was sourced for us by our incredible animal wranglers, Hero Animals.
James and Carolyn.
Caroline Girdlestone and James Delaney, who did an amazing job. And I had worked with them on a few TV commercials a long time ago, and I sort of rang them up and said, I don't know if you guys do sheep, but I've got this film. And they were like, oh, we've got a flock of sheep ready to go. And they had in fact done Babe in Australia, done all the sheep on Babe, and did have this amazing flock of sheep. And
ready to eat flesh if necessary.
Exactly.
Who trains a sheep to eat flesh just in case a film like this is made, Jonathan?
They'd been feeding them bloody human flesh for years just in case. So I'm sure we'll have opportunity to talk later on about some of the amazing things they did.
That looks
Ian Harcourt is a fantastic character actor. He turns up in the oddest films and oddest plays here in New Zealand.
He does, and he's terrific. He's so kind of deadpan and brilliantly funny.
Nothing. He'll be out for a while. Where's your brother? And that girl?
Oh, don't worry. They're gone.
Fresh from doing away with his brother, Angus is ready to go and finish the deal at the big seminar.
Though perhaps a little bit rattled by it, but prepared to move on and
Getting bathed for a month.
make the farm his own. great squirmy moment here.
Ooh.
Love it. And great sound effects too.
I want this place secure.
Yeah, I have something I need to observe here, but I'll be down presently.
No. Stay here.
Stay here. I need to present my work.
Ruthless Angus will not only kill his brother, he'll also shaft his business partner and cut her out of the action.
It also leaves him very separate from pretty much every other character. There's
Yeah,
no one to
yeah.
come to his aid at the end.
I was just coming up with solutions that you hadn't thought of.
Solutions that you thought of, Jonathan.
What about that shot?
They were great together, these two. We even when we're kind of casting the film, we put them together and ran it a bit, and I think it was great. They're both people that kind of got what their characters were supposed to be doing. I think, which was great.
Yeah, I remember Peter coming out of that audition where he first worked with Tandy, and they were both going, "Oh, how was that? Oh, I think we worked well off each other," which obviously they did.
Yeah.
Resolve things with him, I could move on.
But these are your roots.
I know.
And a rather girlish scream, which you encouraged me to be more and more girlish as the take went on, I remember. In ADR they encouraged, let's just get a manly option just in case, which went a bit like this for those at home. Oh!
Which kind of doesn't quite work with the moment, perhaps.
It does nothing for my credibility though.
That was already shot some time ago, I think. But this was an amazing set. This was actually a set, this cave, and it was quite long and beautifully textured with a kind of real stone texture and roots and moss and
Cobwebs, they had a fantastic cobweb machine mocked up out of a drill and paraffin.
And then a great kind of crawl space tunnel as well.
If you look closer you can see that it is actually quite soft down the bottom where it's made of foam.
Don't tell them that.
It's the DVD commentary. You got to let some secrets out of the bag.
Oh, God. Yes, because you did have to do a lot of crawling back and forth on your hands and knees. And
Unfortunately, a later part of the tunnel wasn't soft at all. It left quite a few scratches as we went through it.
oh, really?
All for the art, Jonathan.
Exactly,
all for the art.
Exactly. And this is where Henry gets to help experience with some of the grounding techniques.
Too relaxed.
How does that joke go down overseas with the fart?
It goes down much the same as it does everywhere, really, which is it goes quite well. You're never quite sure who's actually farting, whether Experience is farting or the sheep is farting. And we did
Until I got to the set, I thought it was Experience farting.
yeah, and that kind of pays its way anyway. But then I've always seen it as actually the sheep is farting. And I think when we were mixing the film, we panned it off to the
sheep. They got
sheep direction. But it's funny how long you're in this big theatre mixing a film, and how long you spend on the. Should that fart be louder or quieter or?
You never catch yourself saying, "We're spending a lot of time on a fart."
You do, but then you sort of carry on because it is part of the job.
And then you spend about 18 frames on something else even less seemly.
Now this is where I was saying that the noise of this burning creature, I think as pigs and goats kind of cut together, real pigs and goats who were not being harmed in any way, but their sounds kind of edited together by Tim Preble, our terrific sound designer.
And then the script has put us together for the first time, Experience and Henry.
And and I think it's really nice how this relationship is kind of developing organically, because you have just been through quite an intense experience together, and now you are kind of bonded together.
This way.
Cut to bowl of hideous gore. This is Robbie Burns' address to a haggis, of course, which Mrs. Mack is reciting very nicely. I love this little noise that Angus makes when he sees her.
Oh, hello, dear. Did you see Henry up the hill?
No. I think he's gone.
And now he's clearly becoming unwell from his sheep bite. And Peter did a lovely job of this.
Well, You can't tell what Henry will do. Can you?
His transformation sort of comes on in these little hints.
Yeah. And this was another terrific moment.
Here is money. Good money.
A cheap gag, but
Bastard.
a good one.
Needed to be done, Jonathan. Needed to be done. There's quite a lot of expectation because sheep jokes are such the norm, needing to get some of those classics in there.
Exactly, I think so. And coming out of the exit of the cave.
End of the very first day of shooting.
It was, indeed. And yeah, as we're saying, we had to have earlier decided what the bloody scum on you was going to be like, so that we could put you in it before we'd filmed you dropping in there. But I think our bloody scum continuity went very nicely.
Yeah, I was very impressed. The lovely farm out at Picareri.
It certainly was, and incredible. I love how you can see so far there. Now that, I believe, is the oldest wool shed in the North Island, I think. An historic
What's that noise?
building.
You find some weird things in old wool sheds.
You do.
Was the shearing gear that's in here what was actually on? Or was that created for it?
The mechanics along the top that drive it all were the real thing, but I think we brought our own actual shears themselves. And our first glimpse of the were sheep, which of course is Grant, but this is the results of a bite from one of the sheep and the sheepy creatures.
Kevin McTurk did long hours in the monster suit.
He did, and a terrific job he did too, and as well as the 4 other people it took to operate the suit. There were 3 people on remote controls to make his face work, and then Dave Elsey was also working the neck and head of the creature, though not at this stage. Oh God, no.
Just when you think things can't get any worse.
And this was a scene that we revisited a couple of times in the shoot, and we spent quite a bit of time on the edit as well. And in the shoot, kind of working out how to shoot the creature so you don't see too much of it, but you see enough of it to sort of know what's going on. And certainly when we edited as well, a few different ways of kind of putting it together, working out when can it be funny and when can it be scary. And can you see it's Grant? And sort of smile at that and then run away from him, or not. But you do have to kind of see it before you run away from it, I think.
It's the secret of any sort of horror film. You can't not be scared of the monster. It has to have some power. It has to be some threat.
Exactly, yeah. So
we had an embarrassing moment where, in putting those shears into his neck, I actually made poor Kevin tumble backwards and ended up on his back. Yeah,
it was actually quite a precarious suit to move in and walk around in. So, but you do get the sense here that it's actually quite dangerous in chasing him, and a lot of this stuff was in our 3rd day of shooting the stuff, where we kind of revisited it in a more seeing less is more kind of way. And all those kind of gates and stuff are based on the real stuff that you have in the wool shed to kind of separate sheep from each other as you bring in sheep to be shorn and you get rid of the ones you already have shorn. But we did augment it a bit with our own stuff to make the chase a bit more dramatic and have the gate that you can't get out of at the end.
Here's some great experience gags here.
Yeah.
Is that blood?
And the noises for that creature are, in fact, for the most part, done by me. We used a process that was invented for King Kong, called the Kongalizer, where you make noises into a microphone. It was invented for Andy Serkis to make noises on set. And you make a noise on set, and then it'll be pitch shifted down, sort of 2 octaves to make it deeper and louder. So I was kind of going meh on set, and then it would come out again
as this sort of guttural roar,
bassy, scary sheep monster noise. It was a lot of fun. I did a lot of takes of kind of jumping around the studio being the monster myself. Couldn't resist.
The amniotic fluid should work as an attenuated vaccine on the mutated cells.
And now the prosthetics sort of come to the fore.
Yeah, and we've seen the worst of what happened. So now, but we didn't see how he got there. So now we see a bit of Tucker actually takes us through that process of how you end up like that.
No. All right.
He really does move that fast.
Yeah. And there's the taxi driver again, come to the nice afternoon tea and joining in, but which I'm sure will prove dangerous later on.
A good smattering of extras and stuntmen.
Yeah, some of our stunt performers are threaded in there at the beginning, so you don't notice that they're actually stunt people when they get to do the action later on.
We're missing a couple of the farmhands that we saw earlier on who've met with their demise.
And this was another terrific makeup that was designed by Dave Elsey for a kind of interim man-to-sheep stage. So Weta Workshop were a huge part of making the film, and they got on board really early, and it was Richard Taylor's commitment to helping us make the film, which really helped get the film made. But then when it came time to shoot the film, Weta ended up incredibly busy on some other stuff, and got in Dave Elsey and Lou Elsey, who are based in Australia, who had been doing Revenge of the Sith there and a show called Farscape before that, and they brought a huge amount of experience with prosthetics and animatronics and creature stuff, and you know, Dave and I loved a lot of the same kind of films and really clicked and really enjoyed planning the stuff and creating the stuff, and based on a lot of the design that had already been done at Weta, but bringing new stuff together all the time. It was a lot of fun.
So the great thing about the idea is that it gives opportunity for a lot of people to have a lot of fun. You know, people could go, oh, we could make it like this or make it like that. There's so much scope for having a lot of gags and a lot of humour.
Exactly, and everything that everyone else brought to it, you know, it just kind of got better and better, I think. I felt very privileged to have so many people throwing good ideas at the movie.
They pioneered some good hair, some good fur on those prosthetics as well.
It was amazing, and even the animatronic sheep as well, you know, as you can in fact see on the making of that accompanies this. You know, a lot of stuff with hair is individually punched in just to give it that lifelike look. I love Dr. Rush's look here when she sees that he's been bitten. All about her own irritation. She's completely without empathy.
Now Tandy had quite a different death in the first scripts that I read.
She did, and she actually had the great gag that we see later on that I gave to you with trying to get through the sheep under a sheepskin car cover. And basically it was such a terrific gag, I thought we shouldn't be giving it to a secondary character, we should really be giving it to the lead of the film. So
and then you could augment it with a bit of sheep shenanigans.
Exactly, we can talk about that when we get there too. But yeah, and by this stage in the film I think we kind of wanted to get her dispatched so we could get on with the business at hand, and we've certainly set up the possibility that the investors are in for trouble by the time if the sheep get down there in time, which of course we do want to happen.
These names are shared and
Probably the first and best horror scream
in the film, yeah.
These names are names.
So Angus revisiting his speech we saw him practicing at the beginning, but it's all gone to pieces now. And again, I love how the Angus we saw at the beginning of the film is now sweaty and pale and dark circles under his eyes.
Uber. The old field.
So yes, that's the incredible Uber sheep, which Caroline and James hunted high and low through the country to find the right specimen.
I can't remember whether they measure sheep in hands, but Caroline was saying that this was the tallest sheep they'd come across, and when she found it, she gave James a call and said, "I've found her. I've found Uber."
It was amazing, and they used to wash it with like softly kind of wool wash and dust chalk on it to keep it white. She actually got airs above her station about that sheep and didn't mingle with the other sheep, and she was carried around in a trailer of her own so that she didn't
Bigger trailer than I had. Bigger trailer than I had.
So she didn't get dirty from the other sheep, and started to think she was a bit more important than she was, and then suddenly her scenes were over. Now that is the only CG shot of sheep in the film, which was done for us by PRP VFX, and they did a terrific job and just kind of volunteered that they could make that work, and I think it worked really well.
The sheep, the massacre at the lawn.
Perhaps it won't be that bad.
My day off, if I remember.
Oh really? Right. Tim Wong, one of our stunt people, and that's another one of our stunt performers. So we shot this over 2 days and had 2 units going and were sort of back and forth between different things. This is Luke Hawker, who was a technician at Weta and also an actor, and we had to sort of shoot the first part of that and then leave the camera there, and then he went off and got the whole prosthetic on, and then we came back and shot the second part of that.
Oh.
But it was great fun to sort of set up these individual gags and kind of shoot as much of them as we could and kind of run as much out of them, and even kind of a bit of improvising, and even I always knew that woman was being bitten on the arm, but it was actually just that morning on the way to set I rang Dave and said, can we make a bloody stump that'll squirt blood as well? And
he said, I've got one in the van.
it was just about like that. He certainly had enough on his plate, but could definitely see the worthwhileness of it. Now that's John O'Marks, who really is an amputee, and was game to put a bloody stump on his leg and crawl across the grass. He volunteered for that. And that's Min Windle, who is another one of our stunt performers.
And Nick Blake meets his end with a double whammy.
The old sheep leaping from the side with the sound effect never gets tired. And the director's
your cameo. Now you had big plans for that, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I was going to have top of my brains being eaten out by a sheep, and then when we kind of costed it out, well, it will cost $17,000 to build the sheep brain eating rig, and so I volunteered to let that go and put the money into other more important places.
The shot we did in reverse.
Oh, don't spoil it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, another very simple gag, but a fun one, I thought.
The study, or should I say, boudoir.
The red velvet love nest.
Set the mood. A bit of music next time, Angus.
It's okay.
I love how the scene plays when you're watching the film with an audience, because they sort of chuckle and then they think, oh, hang on, they're not going there, are they? They laugh and they realise they are going there, and then we cut away. So it's I think, oh, maybe it's not too bad. Maybe they're not really going to go there.
And like all good horror films, there has to be a part with darkness.
At last.
Let's make that phone call.
I think Math, then Wicker. Or Wicker, then Math.
This was a big day.
The other
A
phone's...
big long day.
It was very near the end of the shoot, I think this stuff wasn't it? And our weresheep costume suit was working really well by this stage. We, after the first day or two we shot it, we sort of sent it back to the workshop and tried to get more and more kind of out of it. But there's a moment coming up, I think just after the pot lid hits it, where you can see that it's how kind of lifelike the movements become, and the whole neck was working really well. Boom, it turns around like that, and really had a lifelike feeling, which, as they 5 people working it, they really did an incredible job. But to get 5 people to do anything in sync is often quite difficult. So you'd have a piece of direction that you wanted the weresheep to do, and you'd have to make sure 5 people were all on the same page. But these guys were working together really well by the stage too, which was great. This was another gag that was in there from quite early on. That was Mark Gooder from Icon, who was the distributor of the film in Australia and New Zealand and the UK, said, "Oh, have you got mint sauce in there?" And straight away I had this vision of kind of mint sauce as holy water.
finding a
golden
way
shears.
of making this shot, giving an indication that it could get bitten in this shot as well. We took pains, well, literal pains, to make sure that there was a sequence in there that could say
Yep.
that.
And some of experiences, for the first time, she actually has a practical solution for
I
something.
love the look on the wet sheep's face.
No.
What did you do?
Lingui Barfa.
Huh?
Acupuncture point.
You never did teach me lingui barfa, Jonathan.
It is a real acupuncture thing, I believe, but it doesn't actually cause coma or death, I don't think.
Oh,
I just looked it up on the internet.
was it something for flatulence or something like that?
More like that, probably. And this shot and the next shot are actually daytime shots, but we kind of graded them down, and they look terrific in the film.
You didn't have to touch anything up for their noses, did you?
No, that was just what was left of their noses kind of glowing
Fantastic.
white. So we're back in the living room of the house, barricading the doors. And this is kind of paying tribute to those zombie films and things where you get barricaded in the house, which is something I always wanted in the script, but didn't want to just end the whole film like this, so I'm glad that we get to break out of the house again after
Make
this.
that call. Where's the other phone?
Angus is...
But having set up the suggestion that something unpleasant might be happening with the sheep, we do revisit it, and oh my god, he has been misbehaving. But I love his luxurious smoking the cigarette, and he's got this kind of relaxed calm, and he's feeling the most.
I don't know how much you want to really explain of the situation, John.
Angus has been incredibly uptight for the whole film, and now he's let it all
very,
hang
very
out.
relaxed.
And Peter did a really terrific job of this. All acting, I'm sure.
Without an ounce of method, I guarantee.
You've got a pretty fucked up idea of animal husbandry.
Another great line of yours, fucked up idea of animal husbandry. Oh, have I said that on DVD? Now we can't use it.
That's right.
Take him back to the farm.
So now the hero starts to come out. We played a lot with the idea that the brothers face off at this stage. You know, last time they were here, he gave up all right to the farm, and now he's taking it back.
Exactly, and through the story, Henry has completely earned the right to be a really kind of commanding guy, and you don't sort of see the gears change, but I think it's terrific that now you are like that.
Human DNA.
Appalled to discover what.
Ours.
I love the way he looks at your pants when he says, "Ah."
Well, it's more of a sperm sample, really.
You wanker.
Cysti's the mother of invention.
Another
Bitten.
cheap gag.
Nothing.
An even better cheap gag coming up.
Some hippie.
You'll become one of them.
A hippie.
No, Angus. Only worse.
What are you going to do, Henry?
So taking matters into his own hand.
I'm your brother.
Angus or Henry?
In different ways, I guess. But torn with we played a lot with the idea of in rehearsal, how much would he kill his brother for the sake of saving him from the fate he's already seen? Because to all knowledge, Angus doesn't know what will happen to him, how far it will go.
Exactly, and though Henry doesn't necessarily know that he's going to be immune from these sheep, but has an idea that he will turn into a were-sheep later on. I guess Henry thinks that he's going to be torn to pieces by the sheep when they break in.
Definitely.
So the thousands of sheep pouring in was one of the expensive shots that I had in my original storyboards, but had to. How are we actually going to shoot that? And we decided to tell that one with sound.
So that was actually Tammy Davis in his prosthetic, kneeling up there.
It was such a great makeup that we decided to kind of bring it back and get him to play a few miscellaneous were-sheep.
Getting that idea that all these humans that have been bitten are now turning into these were-sheep.
Yeah.
Just the threat becomes even greater.
Next car to town.
Look,
Now, where does he think he's going?
Pants on, thankfully.
Yeah, he was at one stage. Originally, he was going to play the rest of the film without pants, and I almost wish he had actually, because there's only a couple of moments where you see his legs, and we could have actually just done it. Men with like shirts and no pants, I think is funny, and it would have been a lot of fun, but not very dignified for the actor to play the rest of the movie without pants.
Fucking sheep.
No. You're a man, and your father'd be proud of you.
Mrs. Mack, the one person to really goad Henry into the situation that he needs to find himself.
Now, I love that shot. It was actually shot months later on our pickup day, but seamlessly integrates the magic of cinema.
Come on.
The hero was born, and off we go.
You two go. I'm staying here.
Well, what are you going to do?
I'm going to stop Angus.
That car was brilliant. We didn't have too much trouble with it. It always sort of started and kept on going.
It sure did. It was amazing.
What vintage is it? 1960s or something like that?
I guess, yeah, it's like 67 or 71 or something. But I love how it's sort of not too kitchen cutesy. I think it might have been a Morris Minor in the original script, and someone, I think perhaps Kim Sinclair, our designer, suggested not quite as obvious as the super cute cheesy car, but something like the Morris 1100, which is just, you know, like all our kind of grannies drove, you know, and perhaps we almost drove.
We learned to drive and things like that.
A hoof like Angus, they'll tear you to bits.
Showing my age for a second there, or just the age of New Zealand cars?
Both, probably. So this is that gag coming up that we talked about earlier that used to belong to Dr. Rush of the sheepskin car covers, which were a bit of a New Zealand tradition, and giving it to Henry. And it is a great gag, I think. So this turned out to be a really great sequence. This was one sequence that we
went back to about 3 times, if I remember.
And the very first time we started it, it was really late at night, and I hadn't expected to be shooting it that day, and I wasn't quite prepared for it, and we kind of didn't do it very well. And so then the next 2 or 3 times, we knew exactly what we were going to shoot, and so we put the pieces together over several days.
Because we got rained out at one stage as well, just at the end of just close to Rat.
Now this is a terrific gag in the film, which my friend and colleague Matt Granger, who was the script editor of the film, suggested that if Henry was crawling along under a sheepskin, one of the sheep should have a go at him. So I'm very grateful.
I was really keen on getting that shot between between my arms, looking back and seeing those.
Yes.
The crew. Usually you get a closed set situation for stuff like that, but Jonathan thought it'd be better for everyone to see this, and the crew had lovely comments like, "All right, Nathan, assume the position. Back on your knees, boy." Just little encouraging things to make me feel better about what was happening to me. A sheep is heavy, Jonathan. Very heavy.
There's a point where it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're standing around, and it's cold, and you sort of look at each other and you're watching a animatronic sheep rooting the lead actor and on his hands and knees in the grass. And
I'm telling you, no amount of hot water bottles makes you feel good about that. And now we get this wonderful sequence where bursting through the garden with a shotgun out the roof.
And Glennis was terrific in here.
We'll make a fire drill out of you yet!
And it was great to, a bit of explosive devices blowing sheep away was something we had looked forward to doing.
He looks great with those teeth.
And he's got the eyes in now too, I think, the contact lenses, which you see better in the close-up. As he starts to get more sheepy, his eyes get sheepy and his teeth move. Peter did that first go, we were very pleased. Glad he managed to do it without cutting his hand off for the rest of the film.
Come on, darling.
He won't leave his girlfriend behind.
That's loyalty for you.
That's loyalty.
So starting to transform now, and great kind of transformation noises, which again Tim Preble in our sound department designed for sort of twisting bone and things as his whole body starts to change, and they had like corn chips in tea towels and celery and things that it'd rip. So you can see these amazing eyes, which are done with specially designed contact lenses, which start to give him that sheepy look. And his top teeth are coming out because sheep only have bottom teeth and only gums at the top.
So they wouldn't really be too much of a threat without teeth on the top.
It's pretty disgusting though if you look at it closely, and they're quite strong teeth on the bottom for ripping grass out of the ground.
A nice mirror with young Henry, of course, came to this very same spot.
Exactly. And so that was the scene of his initial trauma, and now Henry has to revisit it. And another amazing makeup. by Dave Elsey, as he's becoming more and more sheepy, and most of his own hair is kind of going, and you don't see much of it in fact, but it was an incredible look, and a very cheap old-fashioned gag with just somebody else's hand coming up there.
So that's how they do it.
The magic of cinema.
This was a long night. I remember Peter really waiting for those those moments of action. I'll open my eyes when it's action, because with all the smoke and dust in the barn.
Yeah, I think he found the contacts here very painful, and you know, 3 hours or so in the makeup chair for things like this, just to come and shoot these bits. So we shot this over a couple of nights, and because when you take the makeup off an actor, it irritates their skin so much, you can't really take off one makeup and put another makeup on the same day. So we could only do kind of one of these different makeups each night, so we had to come back over a couple of nights for these different stages that he was at.
I watched the scene prior to the music mix going down on it, and it really heightens it perfectly.
Yeah, well, I was so thrilled with the music on the film, which was done by Victoria Kelly, who's an experienced New Zealand composer, and we really had just so much fun, and she really got it, and we, you know, there's so many different tones to the music. Sometimes it kind of has to be funny or support funny scenes, and sometimes it has to support kind of scary kind of action scenes. So when we talked a lot about tone, and you know, she'd say, hey, is this funny? And we'd, oh, that's not funny. Oh yes, that is funny. And working out what's funny music, and but it really was, you know, after quite an intense shoot, it was such an enjoyable creative process, and she did an amazing job, and you know, gets really quite orchestral at this stage. It was great. And this moment, of course, is something of homage to American Werewolf in London, which is an amazing werewolf film, and still the best werewolf transformation before or since in that movie. And so we kind of, it was certainly something we felt we had to kind of visit and in our film, and even then perhaps I don't think we've topped that amazing original.
It's like I remember getting hit by the gun at one stage. Poor old Kevin didn't have a lot of visibility out of the suit,
No.
so sometimes he was really a dangerous weapon.
But you really, so that is actually the same performer in the suit as when it was Grant, but I think you really buy it as a different creature now, and we're invested in it being Angus, and there's a real kind of viciousness and danger about it that Grant didn't have when he was that creature. And we really see there the kind of backwards, sheepy, stilty legs that the sheep has. So our animal trainers, not only were they great with sheep, but they were really good with the dog as well, and Dice would go where he was told and bark at who he was told to bark at. Though
I think he just got a major commercial gig here in New Zealand, didn't he?
he has, he's all over the television now. See, he won't even remember us now that he's famous.
Dogs are like that, dog. Man's best friend until they get the paycheck and some residuals.
We won't be able to get him for the sequel.
Now you're a bit hamstrung by my complete inability to whistle.
I actually cut the whistling out of the story because you failed to be able to whistle.
You said you'd ADR it in. You assured me that I'd have the best whistle known.
I was so unconvinced by your whistle lips that I had to cut them out.
Where was my dialect coach at that stage?
So we've missed the sheep being torn up by the plane, but that is a terrific moment too, which I really love, and that was kind of put together with different layers of the sheep and a funnel kind of blowing entrails out, and the sheep as well, the plane as well. Tucker, still alive. And he's drenching the were-sheep, which, for those of you in places unfamiliar with drenching, you give medication to sheep with a kind of squirt gun like that for hydatids and worms and things.
And occasionally male actors.
Now that was particularly painful. We hadn't really worked out.
It wasn't retractable. It ended up grazing the back of my mouth.
Sorry about that. Normally those things are very carefully planned so that actors can't possibly be hurt, but that was a big old bit of metal that the director was like, again!
Can you get it deeper? Can you get it deeper?
Harder. Well, you didn't actually say until we'd finished, oh, I'm actually in incredible pain here.
Well, it was lift. It was sweet. And, we didn't have any soft drinks at the unit table, so I thought it was a bit of a treat.
As we gouged a hole in the back of your
And then there's the mangled remains of Angus.
And that was another terrific makeup. But I wanted to see here and think he was dead, and then see the amazing makeup later on when he comes back.
Hold on, Dice. Hold on, good dog.
So at the end of a long evening where they've rounded up all the potentially killer sheep and put them in the barn with no idea exactly what to do with them.
And the end of a very long evening on the shoot as well, to get all those sheep in that barn too, I think, and to make them actually seem, because they were all just kind of standing there like tame sheep, so to get them kind of milling around and with a sense of danger, James Delaney was actually on his hands and knees amongst them. So now you can see another incredible makeup of Angus mutilated by the propeller but turned back into human form, and his whole kind of mangled back. And if you look here on the right, you can see a bit of collarbone sticking out. So now a gag that makes half the audience squirm, and much discussion about the exact length of what would be funniest, the funniest number of frames of a rubber penis, and the answer is 18 in fact. But again, we spent half a day in the edit room. I don't know, should it be longer, shorter, and just working out what would be best there. And now, after some many hours of fart gags, they finally pay off. There's actually a reason why the film is full of fart gags, so that we can actually use it to destroy the sheep.
Richard Black, the cinematographer, was encouraging me to throw it closer and closer to the matte box until it ricocheted off the flag, and he said, "That's close enough, Nathan. That's close enough."
Kaboom. And a beautiful miniature barn we had designed by our art department, which you can see for about 3 frames before it blows up. And our explosion didn't actually go as to plan on the first time, so we had to do a couple of passes there and then comp that in at great expense. Yes, and the film was shot beautifully by Richard Black, and you know, he certainly, one of the things he was combating was variable weather conditions, which in fact you can see in this scene here. But he did a terrific job, I think, and you know, very experienced cinematographer, shot second unit on King Kong and Lord of the Rings. This was his first film as director of photography of the whole film, and he did a great job, and especially working at a pace that he never would have on those bigger films. Twice the number of setups every day probably that he was used to doing. And
Oliver Driver making a very welcome reappearance into the film.
And again, he was such a fun character, I think, that people just enjoyed seeing him and seeing him back.
Let's see how we go, eh? In the final sequence, the only change of costume we ever got.
Right, I love the way because we put that kind of bloody stuff on your costume on one version of your costume from that first day, and it got kind of stiffer and stiffer and grubbier and grubbier.
There's a reason why I seem to run with quite straight legs, is because the pads wouldn't actually bend very much towards the later days.
And you can actually knock on the shirt. And
these weren't really sheep balls. They were chicken. Corn nuggets.
They were goat's balls.
They were goat's balls. Don't tell if Danielle listens to this, she'll get shocked.
And again, looking at our amazing real location vista out across the rolling hills into the water, and I think it must be Carpety Island in the background on the coast of Wellington. It was an amazing place, and we were very lucky to be able to film there. And one last moment with Dice. This was another one of those animal gags that actually took hours of film to shoot to actually achieve the moment.
Just to get him to open his mouth long enough to
put a bar in there, yeah. But there was talk of having to do kind of computer-generated mouth and stuff, but it's actually a small, very cheap and easy editing gag in the end. So, revisiting what was in fact Grant's music in the film, but a really great fun theme that I think kind of sums up the attitude of the film, this music. So it was great to have this as our closing music. And there of course are our cast and crew, it was an amazing cast and amazing crew, and it was a really great feeling on the film most of those people, or a huge number of those people, had been working on King Kong and a lot of other big New Zealand films. But I think we had a lot of fun just working on a smaller film.
Telling a very uniquely New Zealand story, a story that I guess a lot of people waiting for a Kiwi like yourself to write, really.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people felt like on a smaller film that they knew their work would end up on screen. So everyone kind of gave 100%, and I'm hugely grateful to have got to make this film and to have made it with such support from an amazing team of people. Great. Well, there's probably not much more I can say on that note. So thank you for listening. I really hope you've enjoyed the film and enjoyed listening to us talking about it. And thank you, Nathan, for your contribution today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Jonathan, for coming up with such a whacked out idea that somehow attracted a bit of finance and now a worldwide audience. Who would have thought? New Zealand's famous for sheep in a very, very different way.
We'll be the sheep country and the sheep filmmakers for the rest of our lives. And for that we are very grateful. Thank you. Goodbye.